We're going to move forward and actually talk about wildlife corridors and whatnot. So I'll go ahead and stop my share and pass the mic over to Alex to introduce himself and Caroline as well. Thank you.
Yeah, Alex, over to you. We're keeping this pretty conversational, I know, so feel free to just say hello, tell us a little bit about you and what you do at HHMI Tangled Bake Studios.
That sounds great. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Emma. I'm so excited to be back. I did a webinar here, gosh, it must have been a couple of months ago, and I've been on paternity leave in the interim. So time is fully meaningless to me at this point, but I am excited to be back in this space. Because like Caroline said, I work for a group called Tangled Bank Studios, and I work on a series called Wild Hope. We're not citizen scientists. We're video producers and impact producers. But what we do at Tangle Bank is producing stories that hope to inspire the public. That's parents and kids and students or educators or librarians or just anyone who might be tuning into PBS. We want to inspire this viewing audience to care more and engage more about science in the natural world. Wild Hope is a series about conservation success. Biodiversity loss is a huge problem, not to mention the climate change crisis that we're in the middle of as well. But there are scientists that are doing the hard work and are actually changing the tide. There are so many stories of conservation that works, and that's what Wild Hope is. So we've been finishing up our second season. Our last episode premieres on Monday, and this is a series of videos that range from 8 minutes to 18 minutes that are all free. They are global. They are on YouTube on the PBS Nature channel. They're on YouTube as well as on Instagram on at Wild Hope TV. But what I said, our partnership with SciStarter is because we are not citizen scientists, and we've felt that so much of sorry, let me rephrase that. We're citizen scientists in that we are participating in a lot of citizen science programs. Anyone can be a citizen scientist, but we are not the pioneers that are leading the charge. We are not creating or curating these citizen science opportunities, but that is such a necessary part of our mission when inspiring people to engage with the natural world. I've been a producer at Tangle Bank for a couple of years. I started there as a fellow back in 2016. Before that, I worked at PBS Digital Studios. My background is all in digital video production and digital series distribution. So I love what I do. I love working on Wild Hope. I love working with SciStarter, and I'm excited to kick into the conversation today.
Yay, that's fantastic. I like that you brought up, like, of course, you are a citizen scientist yourself, but I think it's always good to start with the reason for the partnership, which is I think it's been really successful. And I think some of the library staff that I see in the chat can speak to this. Programs like Wild Hope are, some of you may be familiar with Flyways, a bird documentary from HHMI, Tangled Bank Studios, that SciStarter spotlighted to highlight the fall bird migration. These uh, they help inspire folks. So you watch it, then you get excited, and then you can participate in citizen science to document nature and hopefully empower conservation with your documentation. So I know you mentioned, season two ends on Monday. Before we pivot into wildlife corridors, citizen science, let's focus on zooming out to Wild Hope as a whole for a second. Um, as you get to the end of season two, any big top line reflections that you have that you want to share with the audience, or how are you feeling, Alex, as you get close to the end of season two?
We're excited for a break before season three, but we're like in the midst of producing our episodes for season three now too. Now, one thing that we've learned is how much we've I don't want to pat ourselves too much on the back, but how much of an impact we can make in community spaces with these types of stories. And that's really twofold. There are stories that are we've told 36 episodes at this point. We've got our first ever episode was about the Billion Oyster Project in New York Harbor, which is an amazing citizen science project that's based in New York. And that story opened up doors in that community because we're featuring work that is just a brilliant biology program, really making a difference at recovering the health of the New York Harbor ecosystem. So it's very local and it's focusing on local impact that's leading to local success. But what I think we've realized is that these stories are very global in nature. This is not the only estuary or only harbor that is undergoing a restoration or focusing on like bivalves as a tool to help filter water. So while we were telling this story about particularly, students and teachers in New York City that are leading this charge, we've seen so much resonance in communities everywhere along coastlines who are doing similar types of work. That kind of connects to what we're here to talk about today, which is that these are truly inspirational stories that connect the dots between ecosystems everywhere. You know, my goal in the impact of what we're doing with Wild Hope is that I'm going to show a clip from an episode in a couple of minutes about golden lion tamarins in Brazil, which was really impactful. We could feature the work and of some scientists down in Brazil that are doing active work now to like bring the golden lion tamarin population back from the brink. It's truly special, but the mechanics at play are universal. This is a story at its core about habitat degradation and thinking of corridors and building corridors to help wildlife. So this has been a story that's resonated with audiences everywhere. And it's one of the reasons why this partnership has showed that these stories can open up so many more doors for citizen science, because these are amazing animals. These are amazing stories. These are big scale stories. These inspire engagement that students or learners, young learners might not have they might not look out their window and see biology that excites them until they recognize how exciting it can really be. And sometimes connecting the dots and showing how similar nature is, no matter what scale you're looking at, is the right recipe for success and the right recipe for sparking that level of engagement.
100%. And on that topic, before we get to the clip, I want to share, if you take away only one link from tonight's presentation, SciStarter.org/Wild Hope is a good one, because you can navigate toward that oyster episode that Alex mentioned, episode 1, to the tamarind episode that we're going to reference in a second, but also to the citizen science tie-ins we've identified. Because as Alex mentioned, when you're reaching learners of any age, these episodes are a great way to do it. They get people excited. And then I see some library staff, some educators in the audience. I see Ellen, who's constantly organizing people to do inspiring things. One program idea is you could show your community this Wild Hope episode, then you could engage them in the follow-on citizen science projects, but the other follow-on activities as well that the HHMI Tangled Bank Studios team have identified as good tie-ins to the different episodes. So I wanted to share that link because that gets at all the episodes, but today we are really lasering in on wildlife corridors in particular, and a few different episodes that speak to that, and the idea of how you can get involved with, things that align with wildlife corridors. So we've said this word a lot. I'll stop sharing here because you all saw the link. So Alex, before you roll the clip about the tamarins, what is a wildlife corridor and how does it relate to the particular episode you're about to show, or the clip from the episode you're about to show?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the terms that we talk about in conservation, it's always important to pair the problem associated with biodiversity loss with the solution that is grounded in real science, good science, effective conservation. So the problem at hand is habitat fragmentation. And this is not unique to what we're going to show as the rainforest, the Atlantic rainforest in Brazil. Deforestation and habitat fragmentation is happening everywhere. Every place in the US where you're driving down a highway that's 6 lanes wide, you're driving across this dotted line that's fragmenting the habitat around you. It's kind of it's a state of the world that we're living in now, but it's not irreversible. It's not something that can't be solved with ingenuity, with grit, with hard work from conservationists, but also, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, these are ideas that you can bring to just rewilding your backyard or rewilding a local green space to think about nature as a wildlife corridor, because the more that you do that, the more that you're helping local biodiversity return. So again, corridors are these connective lines between fragmented habitat where native biodiversity can roam free again. It's a way to, as we've said before in our episodes, restitching back an environment together. So I think that's a really good segue into a clip that I'll show from this episode. So I love golden lion tamarins. I would hope that most people on this call are familiar with them. They're a monkey species from Central and South America that has been the target of conservation efforts for quite some time. In the 1970s, there were fewer than 200 golden lion tamarins that existed in Brazil, like almost as close to the brink of extinction as you could get. And this is as a result of the habitat fragmentation that separates these populations into smaller and weaker subpopulations that can't traverse the landscape. They try, and you've got highways that are, cause massive fatality events for this population that's used to having treetops that are interconnected. It's actually the reason why tamarins are so popular today. Over 150 zoos worldwide joined together to bring the remaining tamarin population, or a subset of that remaining tamarin population, into zoos for a decades-long and truly global captive breeding program in order to eventually reintroduce a healthier population into the wild. Over that span, over 800,000 native trees were replanted in the rainforest in Brazil, and wildlife corridors were built across roadways or under roadways to restitch this environment back together and give the population a foothold that they didn't have before this work began. So I'm going to show this clip that kind of sums up a little bit of this project, and that'll lead into us talking about why this is actually relevant to inspiring engagement with local biodiversity in your own backyard.
Yay!
So I'll share this clip now. Oh, you know what? I got to share audio as well. I always forget to click that box.
And while Alex gets that going, everyone, if you think of questions as the clip is playing, just throw those in the chat, the Q&A, or if you're watching on Facebook, the comments, and we'll make sure to answer after.
Tamarins need large territories to establish new troops and prevent inbreeding. And they won't cross open ground to get from one patch of forest to another. So Luis and his team have replanted more than 800,000 native trees and connected forest fragments with canopy bridges, tunnels, and a highway overpass. They have expanded the forest by about 1,000 acres. These efforts have more than paid off.
Foi celebrado o nascimento do mico leão-dourado número 1000. E no ano 2001...
By 2005, tamarin numbers had increased to 1,600. And by 2014, the population had more than doubled again to around 3,700. It was an astonishing comeback.
Rolled right into the next video.
Nice. That is so inspiring and so exciting. It's one of the most thrilling graphs I've ever seen.
I will say that the episode, I'm not sure if there's any people who follow the golden tamarin story. They are this is the impact of genetic isolation in a population is long term. So the golden lion tamarins are actually a really interesting genetic story as well, because being segmented into these small subpopulations made them all very genetically similar and made them susceptible to disease. So the story goes on to feature a brand new breakthrough in virology to actually vaccinate wild golden lion tamarins from yellow fever, because that's another issue that the population is facing now that they've recovered so quickly. They need to rebuild their genetic diversity. But like these concepts that are in this story that feel very unique to golden lion tamarins in Brazil are like truly universal. We've told us a story about the highway overpass that's being built outside of the Santa Monica. It's the biggest wildlife overpass in the world, and the episode is called Cougar Crossing, and it's an effort to again stitch back together the wilderness of the Santa Monica Mountains. This was inspired by P22, the mountain lion that was photographed in front of the Hollywood sign. Our episode goes into the story behind that photograph, and it's the same concepts of genetic isolation, habitat fragmentation, and corridors as the recipe for success in order to rebuild a healthy population. Very similar story in India, focusing on elephants. Gosh, the list goes on and on, that we've kind of done this globe-trotting story looking at different wildlife corridors that are recipes for success. And all of this is to say, all of us live in environments that are fragmented by roads, fragmented by development, fragmented by paved lots. And the need to think about our own ecosystem as corridors has really led us to creating as many resources as we can, but also partnering with SciStarter to help collaborate on the existing citizen science resources to think about corridors as the recipe for success. It is a proven tool that can undo the damage of like our developed world. One of the resources that we produced on wildhope.tv is just rethinking your backyard as a wildlife corridor, which is very simple. It's planting native plants. It's thinking about pollinator security or bird security. Like, you might not be a part of a long stretch of a corridor in the same way that a roadway overpass would be, but a lot of these flying plants or these flying insects and birds need places to rest, and this builds kind of a patchwork corridor through a lot of city and developed spaces. So the idea of thinking about corridors is, I think, it's just a really fun and inspiring way to improve your own biodiversity footprint, but it also allows you to think of, I'm doing the same thing that they're doing in California, or they're doing in Brazil, or they're doing in India. We're all using the same tools and tricks in order to help restitch the environment back together.
Well, I think there's a great segue there to a question from the chat. What prevents us from building these corridors everywhere? I mean, based on the episodes I've seen from Wild Hope, it seems like these corridors are being built everywhere to an extent, right, Alex?
They're certainly being proposed everywhere. I think that there are some like rock stars in the conservation world. Beth Pratt is the woman that we featured for the Cougar Crossing episode out in LA. And she has been fundraising and doing public outreach and engagement and rallying support for the 101 freeway overpass for years. And it's being built now. Like, it is very possible for individuals to lead this charge. And I wouldn't be surprised if, no matter where you look, there are proposals in the works at varying stages for overpasses over highways. There's one that's out in the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of proposals for these as well. Here in Maryland, where I am, I know of a couple of proposals. They need support. They need public support. They need people to sign petitions. They need people to show up to meetings. So there are you can make a difference just by showing up and showing that support on large scale corridors as they're being built. It's not just about the backyard scale, but there are actual efforts to restitch ecosystems back together.
Phenomenal. To prepare for this episode, I rewatched Cougar Crossing, and you all just did such a great job telling that story. So, and how the local activism and action, and how that particular charismatic cougar, like mountain lion, became the mascot. So to get to Casey's point in the chat, she was talking about the golden lion tamarin, but this sounds like a great example of a flagship species. So this is a little bit of a question with your producer hat on the Wild Hope side. How do you pick the charismatic stars for these different episodes to illustrate these broader concepts like wildlife corridors?
I mean, people have favorite animals. Golden lion tamarins, again, because of this captive breeding program, they've been in zoos around the world for decades now. Like, they are a favorite animal of many people. We've done an episode about manatees, tigers, cougars. Like, charismatic megafauna or charismatic mammals tend to be really sticky, especially for inspiring people to get involved with these stories, and especially inspiring change, right? Flagship species is not necessarily a scientific term, but it's a communications term, and a very effective one at that. So the idea of identifying the spokes animals or spokes plants or spokes fungi that can anchor an awareness campaign. I mean, we're not really doing that as producers. We're focusing on the good conservation work in the world, but a lot of this good conservation work in the world, their communications efforts as well. There's another term called umbrella species that is a little bit more grounded in conservation, and that's thinking of the animals that if you are focusing efforts on protecting one particular species, the cascade effect is to protect an entire ecosystem. This was a case, we did an episode in the Pearl Islands off the coast of Panama, and those efforts have focused on creating protected habitat for sea turtles. Well, guess what? Sea turtles go everywhere. So if you write legislation protecting sea turtles, you're kind of protecting big swaths of the environment as well. So that's a different type of, not quite flagship species, it's called umbrella species, but it's a very similar concept. I did want to circle back to the question that you had asked before about what people can do. And this ties to the citizen science projects that we've partnered with to promote. One question that we try to address in our films is, well, where do you build corridors? Because it might not be as obvious as you think. The answer to that is camera traps. You want to figure out exactly where these animals are navigating or would want to navigate over the fragmented passive habitat. And that's where you should focus your efforts. Another episode, we got a lot of episodes. There's another episode we featured from Belize, where they're building a corridor to connect two stretches of rainforest specifically for jaguars. Episode was called Jaguar Passage. And jaguars are very territorial, but they also don't roam across an entire ecosystem with even distribution. They pick their pathways. So by using camera traps, the scientists were able to find those pathways and then work with the government to make those pathways protected spaces rather than trying to protect every corner of an ecosystem that they could. That way, it's much more cost effective and much more reasonable to kind of build this stretch of corridor. And it's done by having good data. And there are a lot of good citizen science projects that are using camera trap technology to survey local populations, and they just don't have the time or the manpower to survey all of this as a science team. Liwa is the project that we've featured on a couple of our different projects. It's a wildlife corridor in Africa, and they need people. They need support. They need people to go into this database, look at photos, and help them understand what animals are using what patches of land. That's an effort to build a better wildlife corridor.
Yeah, I feel like this is a great time to highlight our citizen science tie-ins. I'm going to share my screen again. So if you all go to the SciStarter.org /Wild Hope team page, you can do the dash or not the dash. It all goes to the same place. You can find all the different episodes and some of the recommendations, but we also have our 3 top projects up here that align with the themes of tonight's webinar. So iNaturalist, where you can document the biodiversity that comes with a wildlife corridor. So if you end up greening a public space near you, or rewilding your own backyard, or whatever green space you have access to, iNaturalist is great to document the corresponding biodiversity. Instant Wild, that encompasses the Liwa project that Alex just mentioned, where you can classify camera trap data. People always ask me with these camera trap projects, why can't an AI do this? Well, the answer is AI isn't good enough quite yet. Eventually it will be. It'll be trained on the data that citizen scientists have classified, but we need you, and we need you to be our partners in that. And then we have all sorts of resources that the HHMI Tangled Bank Studios team have created about rewilding, especially rewilding in your own community. So you can click to that icon and get to all of those things, including some special rewilding episodes from the Tangled Bank Studios team. Actually, Alex, could you speak on that for a minute? Because I think the work you all do inspiring others to rewild is so exciting, and especially because we have educators and library staff in the audience. They might even be able to rewild their library front yard or backyard, or their school front yard or backyard. So I'll let you speak to rewilding in your own community for a second.
Yeah, it's a great segue, and it's going to tee up the next video clip that I wanted to share very well. I wanted to address Ellen dropped a comment in the chat that I think is very spot on. The challenge of getting people to care. Like I know that this community that we've got here, these are people who we're already bought in, right? I don't need to convince anyone on this call now or anyone watching this webinar to care about these issues. How do you break through to that next level? And that's why for us, I work at a science institute, HHMI, Howard Hughes Medical Institute. It's a research institute that believes in public engagement of science, and that's where the Tangled Bank Studios and Wild Hope come from. And to us, these stories distributed on a platform like PBS or like YouTube allow us to, if we do our job well, to kind of break out of the choir, to reach people who might not have signed up to care about nature before, but they watch something that feels inspiring, or there's a character that's a part of this story that they feel like they can relate to. To us, it's not necessarily about producing just informative guides on here are the problems, here are the solutions. We do that as well. But by producing a story and by investing in this tried and true kind of storytelling system, we hope to reach more. We hope that if we lay the cards out on the table well, people will find these stories inspiring and think about nature in a way that they haven't before. And actually, the clip that I'm going to share now is about one of the many types of allies that are in this conservation space, which is farmers and ranchers. So this is a story of ours called A Farm Goes Wild. This is based out of it's Coombs Head Farm in the United Kingdom, and the farmer that you'll see featured in this episode is called Derek Gow. He owned a 400-acre plot of it was a ranch, it was a sheep and cattle farm. But he's also been active in the conservation space for many years and made the decision to rewild his entire farm. But also, I mean, rewilding is another concept that I want to define, because it's not simply recreating nature. It's just letting nature do its thing. It's an effort that is hands off and long term, and recognizing that the natural processes that once shaped an environment before we changed it can reshape it into what it once was. So I'm going to share this clip, and I think it'll tee up a good conversation about kind of the evolution from, or a parallel thinking about your wild spots as corridors. The effort of rewilding is a longer term and kind of messier process, but a really fun one to get people engaged in nature. So I will share that video now.
Yay!
Derek replaced his livestock with ancestral breeds that helped shape Britain's living landscape long ago.
We keep animals that are domestic as lawnmowers or burrowers or the creators of wallows. They're not producing food, or they're not producing meat or milk or anything else.
Galloway cattle imitate the ancient auroch, the wild ancestor of all domestic cattle. Along with Exmoor ponies, the oldest horse breed in the UK. Their grazing behaviors create habitats that encourage plant growth and insect life. Iron Age pigs are a modern hybrid meant to emulate the wild boar that roamed these fields 4,000 years ago.
You want big animals like a few boar running through to create wallows that then become ephemeral pools, so you get more amphibians on the landscape as well.
5 years on, the results are easily visible.
Right now, this pond's actually full of tadpoles. So some of the local frogs and toads have taken advantage of these ponds that have become available over the winter, and the tadpoles are absolutely feasting in this area. It's both a home in its own right, but it is also a food shop for so many other species at the same time too.
By returning water to the surface of the landscape, you create living space for all the other creatures like ducks, amphibians, water beetles, dragonflies. Everything is intricately linked.
Fantastic.
I can listen to people talk in thick Scottish accents for anywhere, like for as much time as possible. There's a question in the chat about the animals on the farm being tagged. Coombs Head Farm, like many other of the rewilding projects that we've featured, are kind of seen as experiments. I mean, Derek Gow he has the look and feel of kind of like he's a farmer. He knows the land, but he's actually one of the best conservationists in the United Kingdom. And what he's doing has caught national attention because it's very research driven. Rewilding is one of my favorites to talk about. One of my favorite topics to explore in conservation and biodiversity recovery, because it can be big scale, long term, research driven projects, but it can also be as easy as saying, well, when you're thinking about landscaping your yard, maybe just don't. Or if you're thinking about raking your leaves, it's okay to leave them. Or instead of weeding up this patch of green space that's out behind your building, you know what, let the weeds flower, because weeds are actually native plants that are beneficial to local wildlife in a much different capacity than a beautiful shrub that is winds up being invasive or introduced from someplace else. So rewilding is a concept that kind of works on all scales of investment. And again, to this question in the chat about how do you get people involved, we have realized that one of the easiest ways to get people to take biodiversity into their own hands and to be agents of positive change is just to tell them to don't do anything. Just let nature do its thing. It's a very easy call to action when it comes to just sit back, relax, and trust nature. And again, this is based in real science. This isn't the easy way out. This is based in like real living laboratories, like Doomshead Farm.
Phenomenal. Yeah, and I know with rewilding, like you said, sometimes the easiest call to action is just to do nothing, which is novel. And Ellen put in the chat, she said, what I see from your stories is that you are modeling this overused but applicable word agency and the power of intention. So this is a little bit of a throwback to an episode from earlier this year, but I was so inspired by the We Are the Ark project that you spotlighted. And I think that really epitomizes this concept of agency and taking action. Could you speak to that for a minute, Alex?
Yeah, we certainly look at some of the best conservationists in the world. Like, I mean, these are projects of projects that have measurable and big scale effort, like measures of success. But one thing that we are making sure is very important to the program, and especially our outreach, is empowering anyone to be that agent of change on their own scale. So We Are the Ark is another story from the UK, focuses on a naturalist named Mary Reynolds who wrote a book called We Are the Ark and is inspiring this global movement of rewilded nature, kind of messy nature spaces that could be as big as a couple of acres or as small as just a flower pot. But by submitting it into this global map, this global system, and we're a project within SciStarter. We actually put that in over the summer. By submitting your native space, you're contributing to this patchwork corridor that's spanning coast to coast and continent to continent. There's another very similar project called Homegrown National Park, which is more based here in the UK, but very similar concept. That for that project, the idea that if the patchwork of yards and strips of green land in between highways, any space that can be rewilded, if that's all stitched together, it becomes what is basically the biggest national park that our country has, and it's all rewilded space. So these are opportunities for anyone to get engaged at any scale, and it truly makes a difference. If you live in a city and just have a windowsill, planting native flowers is a way to give bees and butterflies or birds a resting spot as they traverse the rest of that city. It's very small, but it's very real, and it is something that anybody can do.
So exciting. And Casey was mentioning she found some local connectivity projects in her area, which is so awesome. I think that cues us up nicely for our last clip that you had about the rights of nature and bio blitzes. So working as a community rather than just working as an individual. So should we move on to that part?
I would love to. So yes, there's one of the other concepts two of the other concepts that Caroline just mentioned. One is bio blitzes, which is another way that individuals can be agents of change. We've talked about the need for good data when it comes to scientists making critical infrastructure decisions about what land to protect or where to build a wildlife corridor, where target invasive species efforts. All of this is based on good data. And this is where citizen science platforms like iNaturalist come in. We've partnered with iNaturalist on a couple of projects over the years. This is an opportunity for anyone with a phone or a tablet, or you can do old school pictures and upload them to a desktop computer if you want. But anyone can be a surveyor of wildlife in their own corner of the world. And all of these observations, or the best observations, the ones that are, not just blurry photos, but the observations that can actually be confirmed by the community, are deemed research grade and actually form a pool of data that scientists around the world can draw from. A BioBlitz is an opportunity to survey nature as a community. So we've run a bunch in the past for Wild Hope and prior projects. We've worked with libraries across the country to run BioBlitzes when it ties into the projects that we're trying to get out there. And this is an opportunity for communities of adults and families and kids, anyone who's got a phone or a tablet or a camera, to spend some time to survey a space, to survey a natural space as much as and as thoroughly as possible. So taking photos of plants and insects and birds and mammals and anything that you can find all in one snapshot of time is actually a really valuable tool for scientists to have. Again, they can piece together a lot of data that's collected over seasons or over years, but by having a dedicated force of bioexplorers to go out there and actually collect data all in one go, it's incredibly valuable. And we know that this actually helps lead to real research decisions that are being made. The clip that Caroline mentioned, she's going to tee up. This is something we produced for social media, so it's vertical. It's a vertical video that we released on Instagram. This is highlighting a story from the Dracula Reserve in Brazil. This is a reserve in the mountain. Sorry, not Brazil, in Ecuador. It's an orchid reserve. That's one of the most biodiverse places on the planet. I mean, Ecuador is not that big, but it's about the size of Nevada. But it's estimated to be home to twice the number of plant animal species in the US and Canada combined. Like an incredibly biodiverse place where there are species that haven't been discovered yet. And they use the same tool. They use iNaturalist, actually, and they use a BioBlitz as a community of student activists who are out in the forest to showcase the biodiversity and to log it so that scientists can advocate for better protections of this rainforest. This is from our episode called Does Nature Have Rights? And it's centered around the Rights of Nature movement, which is a legal movement to enshrine the rights of this rainforest into Ecuador's constitution. It's a successful story. They have indeed done that, and it's not the only rights of nature story that we've featured. I mentioned the Panama story earlier. That's a rights of nature story where they're advocating for constitutional protections of the Pearl Islands at Panama's coastline. There are rights of nature stories happening here in the U.S. I think Montana there was a group of student activists that lobbied for Montana to have a statewide rights of nature clause put into their state constitution. Like, this is actually happening around us. And again, this is an opportunity for advocates and for activists to get involved and to lobby for this type of policy, but also this policy depends on, again, good data and good citizen science in order to show the biodiversity that needs protecting. So I'm going to play this clip. It's a very short one, only 90 seconds long. And it doesn't quite fit on my entire screen. So I hope that I can actually show it and everyone can see it.
A beautiful Anolis dracula, also referred to as South American chameleons.
You excited?
Yeah, because there are a lot of new species.
Finding new species is actually relatively common. Every expedition I've been on, we've come home with a list of potential new species to science.
Aquí tenemos una ranita del género Pristimantis. No sabemos exactamente qué especie es. Entonces es importante tomar fotos, tomar un punto GPS, usar esta aplicación que es iNaturalist. Es muy divertido.
We only know of about 2 million species on the planet out of an estimated 8 to 9 million. So we've only scratched the surface of what lives here.
These small species have one chance to be recognized, not only as an object. They are subjects of rights.
That was awesome.
I love that clip. So that's part, I mean, we released a full half-hour episode called Does Nature Have Rights that features this story, that cast of scientists and the work that they're doing in Ecuador. A big part of Wild Hope is building an effective social media campaign, making sure that we are engaging young people on the platforms where they feel at home, in this case on Instagram. And we're not just taking clips out of the episodes because they're not going to feel authentic there. And this is one of our best performing social media reels, because I think that it really feels like one. It really feels like something that is short and shareable and engaging. Again, it starts with like some of the most bizarre wildlife that you might have ever seen, but it ends with this idea of the BioBlitz is a tool that's being used by scientists, and for us to use that to tee up a conversation of BioBlitzes can happen anywhere. New species can be discovered anywhere. Impactful science can happen anywhere. Rights of nature can happen in your own backyard. It's again, the way that I started this conversation with corridors, it's all the same science. Conservation is just the big stuff, the little stuff, it's all using the same principles. And videos like this are one of the most effective tools we have for getting people involved in the conversation that didn't think about protecting local biodiversity before.
Phenomenal. And yeah, on the topic of designing things for social media, what I love about that video was the music and how it was edited, just phenomenal. I know there are people who are watching who want to use Wild Hope and use some of the materials you've created to start these conversations about biodiversity and protecting nature. Do you have any tips for them as they're trying to leverage these materials in their own communities to communicate these messages?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, this is all for free. Like, all this stuff is out there. It's very important for our mission to make sure that the content is free and global and accessible to anyone. And it can be used on a couple of different levels. We have some folks who just share the videos. I mean, it sounds easy, but the act of sharing content or the act of sharing messaging is one of the quickest and most effective tools that people have to amplify not just the stories, but amplify the scientists and the organizations that are involved. That's the number one thing that we ask we answer when people ask how they can get engaged. Like, share the stuff, because it actually helps to elevate the profile of the work that we are featuring. We know some organizations that just play content off of YouTube. Educators can play content off of YouTube. We've got some library partners that just have the stuff queued up, ready to go. So it's all free on the PBS Nature YouTube channel or wildhope.tv. We also have educator guides available for most of our episodes. The couple most recent ones don't have them yet, but all of the episodes that I've shown do. So those are they're meant for in classroom use, kind of upper middle school through high school level like intro level biology and AP biology. But they're also good guides for just discussion questions, key takeaways and definitions of terms, as well as background materials that are written out to go into a bit of a deeper dive into the story and the mechanics of that conservation. So those are found on our website. And then if anyone has an interest in actually formally using these materials for events or for in your actual organizations, we make that available for free as well. We've got an opportunity on the website to just request a screening with us, and we've got a growing number of institutions that are opting to show these on loop, like in their lobby. We've got nature centers. There's a nature center in Wisconsin I was working with today that is picking wildlife corridor episodes to just show on a loop in their lobby for as long as they would want, and we make that available to anyone who knocks on our door. So on the wildhope.tv website, there's an opportunity to request a screening that comes to my inbox, and I make sure it can happen, because that's one of the biggest ways for us to actually make an impact.
Yes, and then after you all do your screening, you can get your community to participate in a follow-on citizen science project. And speaking of, Laura and Emma have the same question in the chat. So Laura says, I live in an area in New York where the green areas are maintained by the city, and they are generally landscaped. How do you even start approaching this? And I'm assuming that's rewilding. So beyond just getting the city commission to watch from Guardian to Gardener to Guardian episode of Wild Hope, Alex, what tips do you have for people who want to approach rewilding their urban green spaces that might be maintained by someone else?
First things first, you are not alone. I think that a lot of cities, especially, or a lot of spaces where you might have a local nature center or a local Audubon society, or even a local library or science center. I mean, there are allies in the community that probably have a lot of the same questions that you do, but might have been working on this, working on finding the right inroads to advocate for local public officials to allow spaces to just go unmowed or to go unweeded. I'm here. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, and there are signs that people there are issues with homeowner associations. That's something that we hear a lot, quite frequently, where leaving plots of land to just be returned to nature might get some folks in trouble. But here in my neighborhood, we're able to put up signs that say this is a rewilded space. It is deliberately messy. We're excited for nature to recover, and that's enough to to get to allow us to actually have these green spaces that go untended, so that we can actually have some native plant life return. So there are efforts at all scale. It can be at the neighborhood level, it can be at the policy or state level, but I encourage you to reach out and find allies. Again, Audubon societies are really good places to go because birds are everywhere, and birds need native plants to thrive. So those are some of the best places to start.
Yeah, and that's a great argument for biodiversity, right? It's by rewilding, we make all of the species in the area stronger, which makes us better off too. So if you want inspiration for the sign that Alex mentioned that can kind of be the permission structure for rewilding, you can go to the SciStarter.org/Wild Hope page, click on the rewilding icon. I put the direct link in the chat, and that can help get you started. I know we're getting close to the end of time here, but Ellen wants some backstory on Wild Hope, and I think that's a nice place to kind of get us to the end. So yeah, Alex, tell us, how did Wild Hope get started? How did PBS pick it up? Why did HHMI, Tangled Bank Studios, back this effort in the first place? Give us some of that framing.
PBS loves content that you can get them for free. Like this is, for us to be in this situation as a well-funded medical institute, like we produce this content. We are the sole funder of this content. So we don't need to sell this in order to continue producing more. And that's one of the biggest opportunities that's opened up by distributors for us. So, we had a couple of episodes of Wild Hope that we actually worked. Actually, it takes quite a bit of effort to get it in front of the right people at PBS. We worked with something called American Public Television, which is not the same as PBS, but it also broadcasts on public airwaves. And we were able to call up, like, once we put our content, the first 8 episodes, into the APT system, we can call an individual station, not a national broadcast for PBS. You can call an individual station, let them know that this content is available, that it's good, that it's relevant, and ask if they can find a spot to air it. And that's kind of how we started with season 1. So there was this patchwork of, city after city after city that decided to air 1 episode, and then maybe 2 episodes, or maybe all 8 episodes. And that started to get the word out there on the series. When we moved into season 2, we decided to go strictly digital. We know that there was interest in shorter stories that allowed us to produce more and kind of show more corners of the world. And again, more corners of the world means more people that feel like they're being seen in our stories and represented in our stories. So at that point, we started talking to PBS Nature because they had really liked the work that we'd done with the first season. And we went for a digital exclusive release. So it's PBS Nature on YouTube, but also through the PBS app with PBS Nature. So we're not really trying for broadcasts anymore because personally, I think most of the audience that we would want to reach doesn't really tune into broadcast. They're online. They're engaging with content online. People are watching more and more content on YouTube, or more and more content over apps that you might have plugged into your TV, like a Roku or a Fire Stick or an Apple TV. And that's where you can find us now. So it's been a matter of us thinking more about our audience, thinking more about who we would want to reach, how we would want to reach them, where we would want to reach them, and where we can actually engage them. I'm actually really happy that we're online as well, because it's easier to get people to click a link, or to come follow us on social media, or to share with a friend. It's very hard to share a program that you watch on your broadcast TV with a friend, but something that you find on YouTube is very accessible. So I think that our numbers there have continued to climb, and that means that we're just reaching more people with these types of stories.
Phenomenal. And our last few minutes, so Casey said, if you want to do an episode on the Sonora Desert ecology, the most biodiverse desert in the world, I got you.
We are actually, so we're doing season 3 now, but season 4 is already in our sights, and we are We're looking for places to go. So if folks have ideas, and also if you have local stories of biodiversity as well, through our Instagram page, we want to focus a lot more on the small scale but impactful work that people are doing. So please stay in our community. And I don't know if my email is included in this webinar, but like I would want to hear from this community as well, because this is a global movement. You know, this is a movement that touches nature at all scales, in all shapes, and the coalition of people that are involved spans from some of the best scientists in the world that are replanting rainforests to kids who just want to have a native wildflower garden. So it really is impressive how many people can get engaged, and it's communities like this that help amplify that to the next level.
Oh my gosh, and people are jumping in. Ellen said, "I'm your Everglades person." So
I would love to do Everglades. We've done 3 episodes from Florida. We did manatees returning to Crystal River. We did gopher tortoises and indigo snakes from the longleaf pine forest in upper Florida into Georgia. And then we did a sea turtle story along the coastline. So in our own backyards in the US, I mean, I like going to places like India and Brazil and Jamaica, but there are some stories about wildlife here in the US that are just amazing and really do touch people in the best of ways.
phenomenal. I think that's probably all we have time for. So Alex, we're so grateful to you, and Emma,
I could
take
go
us
on
home.
for so much more. Thank you
Yes!
everyone for the opportunity. Again, we are in this to win this, and season 2 is ending now, but season 3 is next year, and season 4 is the year after that. So we're just excited to keep doing this and to stay really involved in these communities.
Phenomenal.
I'm so excited that some folks are already expressing interest in supporting for your content. So I will keep note of those folks. I'll save the chat so we can keep those names in mind. So hopefully we can get back to you. But yes, thank you so much for being here as our guest to talk about all this stuff. For everyone who's ready to jump off in 2 minutes, I just want to do a quick closing on what's happening next, and a quick survey if you're willing to. When you exit this or when you exit this call, it will automatically send you to the survey. So for anyone who's like, yes, SciStarter Live is awesome, of course it is. Next week we'll be talking about the Leave No Trace project. So if you're connected to a university especially, or you want to do this for your community, this is a Leave No Trash challenge that's set for Citizen Science Month in April. So if you're interested in that, join us again next week on the 19th, and we'll talk about that. And then Citizen Science Month is coming up, so I just want to throw this out, coming up as in like next year, technically, but we have started planning as of May of 2024. So we are finally going to start putting it in your faces. So if you're getting ready to start planning for April for any type of engagement that you want to do, if it's just you as a volunteer or if you have a community to engage, get ready, get excited. It's happening again, and will keep happening. And then if you need any of the resources that SciStarter provides, here's a quick, nice list of them. And you will receive a follow-up email with all these items as well, with all the links from the chat as well, and anything else we can provide you to give you context for today's call. And if you need to reach out, I did drop it in the chat. I dropped Alex's email, and I'll also leave that in the follow-up email as well, assuming that's okay to do. Awesome. Okay, I think that was it. Yeah, if you are able to, right after this, it'll send you to a survey when you exit. But otherwise, I have nothing else to share. So thank you all for being here with us. And thank you again, Alex, for joining us for this one. It was a joy to hear everything and watch those videos. They're such cute little animals, and they're just so fun to watch.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah, good night.